Over the last 7 days, we have heard crazy things happening, not just with Tesla and the affordable model launch and all these new FSD innovations, but also on OpenAI, Nvidia's investments, and the AMD deal of OpenAI. And it sounds a little crazy for multiple reasons, because what we have learned is that OpenAI is now making deals with the biggest chip manufacturer in the world and with its competitor at the same time. Plus, these deals seem a little circular, where Nvidia gives OpenAI money so OpenAI can buy Nvidia's chips, and then OpenAI gives AMD money and gets shares in AMD, so AMD can deliver chips to OpenAI, and AMD is competitive to Nvidia. So what is even going on? So here you see the famous Jensen Huang, one of the smartest people ever and the coolest entrepreneur besides Elon, in my opinion, pitching the Nvidia Rubin system. So they know how to make great design look even better. Look at this super chip coming next year. And, when we look at these deals, let me first go through the deals so you know what's going on. There was a deal announced, and when I say deal, it was a letter of intent, by the way. This is not a done deal, but given the size of these two companies, Nvidia and OpenAI, and the attention the market gives that, this is not just fake news, right? This is probably going to happen. And in this deal, Nvidia is committing $100 billion to give to OpenAI. And in return, OpenAI commits to 10 gigawatts of compute to be purchased from Nvidia, which is the equivalent of $200 to $300 billion in revenue for Nvidia. And that is focused on Rubin, Vera Rubin, the new chip generation. So currently we have Blackwell, the core, the heart of the AGI industry, AI, Blackwell. But next year, we will see the next generation, Vera Rubin, of Nvidia, the super chip. Here it is, this is Vera Rubin. And OpenAI committed, or kind of committed, or whatever, to buy 10 gigawatts of these for $300 billion. So basically, we have to understand, okay, what is the deal here? OpenAI says we are going to buy $300 billion worth of chips from you, and you give us $100 billion for some equity in OpenAI, and then we take your money and buy your chips. But of course, it's leveraged from an Nvidia perspective because they get equity plus another $200 billion in cash from something somewhere else. Okay, very interesting, right? Very, very interesting. And now we have the competitor of Nvidia, AMD. By the way, first cousins, the CEO of AMD, first cousin of Jensen Huang, both from Taiwan. Crazy story when you think about it, that the biggest CEOs at the heart of the AI revolution, Lisa Su and Jensen Huang, are first cousins. That is crazy. The Taiwanese, they know something. So here's the MI400, which is also a GPU that does similar things to Vera Rubin and Blackwell. And coming in 2026, they will also be able to build these giant AI or AGI factories that OpenAI, as the biggest AI company in the world, fastest growing, 700 million users and crazy scale, biggest private owned company in the world now, bigger than SpaceX, just overtook SpaceX in market cap. Hey, creating these videos is a lot of work. Please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Now let's get back to the video. So after announcing this deal, this $100 billion deal with Nvidia, getting the $100 billion from Nvidia, giving Nvidia equity, and buying $300 billion of chips from Nvidia, like some weird circular deal here. Guess what happened this week? Now, OpenAI also announced that they have a deal with AMD, where OpenAI is going to buy a lot, like up to 6 gigawatts. So not 10 like Nvidia, but 6, also enormous, ridiculous amounts of compute. 6 gigawatts in chips, in chip capacity from AMD, the MI400 in 2026, starting in 2026. And based on milestones for buying these crazy amounts of AMD chips, getting up to 10% of AMD in warrants. So I don't want to make it too complicated. Basically, get 10% of AMD. So you understand, we have Nvidia giving OpenAI $100 billion and getting a chunk of OpenAI equity, and then OpenAI taking that money or whatever and giving it to AMD and getting 10% of AMD, which is a publicly traded stock that went up 29% when this news hit a couple of days. Here is another view of Vera Rubin. So basically, this is the one thing, 10 gigawatts of energy worth of these chips versus the MI400 from the competitor and first cousin of Jensen, Lisa Su and AMD. What do we make out of all of that? Here is a little table I provide to you. So AMD path, total infrastructure potential up to 6 gigawatts versus 10 gigawatts. Nvidia, both doing the deal with OpenAI. The likely approximate spend is $100 to $150 billion worth of stuff they're spending on AMD. And twice as much on Nvidia. You see, Nvidia is a little more expensive than AMD. So AMD always says you get more compute for less money. And Nvidia says, well, you get better compute and more integrated systems for a little more money. The OpenAI benefit here is for buying and committing this in milestones to AMD starting next year. They're getting up to 10% of AMD. Worth, no one knows, but AMD right now is, I think, 400 billion, 300 to 400 billion market cap. And so if you own 10% of that, all of these things go through the roof, of course. So if once AMD is $1 trillion, you got 100 billion out of this deal. But it's not cash, so that takes a while. As here from Nvidia, they just get straight up 100 billion in cash for paying a little bit more for that compute. And both of that is scheduled to start in the second half of 2026, okay? For us as investors, for us as pioneers who are interested in the age of AGI and predicting what is happening to this world, we have to make sense of this deal. What is my interpretation here? My interpretation is, put yourself into the shoes of OpenAI and Sam Altman. He sees that he is becoming the central, or is already the central consumer of tokens. He and OpenAI is approaching now 1 billion users. All enterprises in the world, or like a huge chunk of the most important enterprises and companies and governments in the world, are using his system, ChatGPT. And he's in a very powerful position now for negotiating with suppliers. And who are the most important suppliers for him? It is Nvidia and AMD. More specifically, Nvidia, because Nvidia is the big boss in this whole space, right? Close to $5 trillion worth, over 10 times larger than AMD, and totally dominating on the technology front. So if you're Sam Altman and you say, well, I need to spend $300 billion on these guys, that gives you a lot of power. And at the same time, Jensen Huang, he's drowning in money. His biggest problem is he has too much money, literally. Nvidia is completely drowning in money. So what do they do with the money? Jensen is smart. He says, well, let's just take equity stakes in every single super company we can get our hands on, in CoreWeave, in OpenAI, in xAI, right? He just announced $2 billion in Elon's company, and he's a big Elon fan. He's a big Sam Altman fan. He's a fan of everyone who buys trillions of his chips, right? Trillions of dollars worth of his chips over time. So we are looking at a complete bonanza here, where from Sam Altman's and OpenAI's perspective, it makes total sense. Like, if I buy $300 billion of chips from you, I want to get something. And then Jensen says, well, what about I give you 100 billion? But I want equity from you because you're growing like crazy. If I give you 100 billion, this stuff is worth a trillion in no time. And then Sam says, sure, I mean, I buy 300 billion, I get basically 100 billion discount, you get equity from me, now you have incentive of giving me even more for less, and we get all insanely rich. Then Lisa Su comes along and says, wait a moment, Sam, we have this little company called AMD, we are also very important. Also, do you really want to be completely dependent on Jensen Huang and Nvidia? You should have at least one competitor in this space, and if you don't buy from us, we might die, and then you are left alone with Jensen alone. And then Sam says, that makes total sense, that pitch. Let's also funnel tons of money into AMD and give them a chance to really show what they can do and give them real momentum. And AMD is a tremendous company. By the way, Lisa is a tremendous CEO. Hard to be as good as Jensen. But Lisa did a very good job, and I think her chips are amazing. So for Sam, he thinks, well, I get 10% of AMD for free by just buying the stuff I need anyway. And Lisa thinks, well, I don't mind giving this guy 10% if he gives me an insanely larger chunk of revenue than I ever made before. 6 gigawatts, 100 billion in revenue, that is ridiculous, right? If you take a look, AMD revenue, let's take a look, AMD revenue 2024. I don't even want to know the answer. So they made $25 billion in revenue. The entire company last year made $25 billion. The entire company The entire company of AMD made 25 billion. Now Sam comes along and is like, oh, what about $150 billion in revenue from one single deal? Would you give me 10% of that? Would you give someone who grows you 600% 10% of your company? Of course you would. So there you have it. That's the deal. And from Sam, now he wins on all fronts. He gets the Nvidia deal, right? He gets 100 billion from his most important supplier and secures $300 billion of GPUs from Nvidia. At the same time, he takes that money, gives it to AMD, gets 10% of AMD. AMD is very happy. Everyone wins. Now let's take a step back. Is this all a ridiculous bubble with circular deals? Or how is it even possible that everyone wins here? That two competitors, deadly competitors like AMD and Nvidia, are now making deals with the same vendor, and effectively Nvidia might be funneling money right into AMD, takes a chunk of equity from OpenAI, and with that takes a chunk of equity in AMD, its own competitor. Isn't that all nuts? Well, we have to take a step back and understand that we live in the age of AGI. Yes, this looks a little incestuous, but it's actually not. Because what's behind the craziness is that there is actually billions, hundreds of billions, and soon trillions of dollars flowing into that whole ecosystem from the outside. Look how people spend money on Lovable, on Replit, on Cursor, on all these super coding platforms. I mean, Lovable above all of them, of course. Look at what's happening with ChatGPT at the center. Even X and Grok are growing like crazy. And why are they growing like crazy? Why is everyone not even blinking? Not even blinking. I don't even know how much I spend on Lovable. Probably $2,000 a month. I mean, not just me, Pioneerlands. So why do we do that? Because what we get out of this is insane. I probably have 200, 300, 400 coders, professional, $200,000 a year coders now working for me for the price of $2,000 a month or $1,000 a month. I don't even know how much we spend. Because Lovable is like having 200 full-time coders on my team. What does it do? It allows me, as the founder of Pioneerlands, you join us, by the way, you have to go to pioneerlands.net. It allows us to build the Pioneer operating system, a new society, a new civilization. We can sit there and code a new civilization where everyone starts interacting, building institutions, creating more capital for everyone. How is this even possible? Because AI supports us. We are building insane value with this. I don't mind spending $1,000 on Lovable. But now think about it. When was the last time someone invented a SaaS system, like a website where you go and everyone who signs up immediately drops $200 a month, $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, like every human very soon? Just do the math on that. And that's actually what's driving this whole space. That is why all that money flows in the end into the center, into Nvidia, OpenAI, AMD. These are the companies who fuel this entire thing. And, Anthropic and Grok, like these guys. So we have to understand this is not incestuous. There's a little incestuous stuff going on, yes, between these three. And Elon is also in the mix now. But no one cares because this is the eye of the storm, and the storm is real because it transforms every single industry, starting with coding, which is the meta industry of all industries, because everything is coding, but also medicine and biology and law and legal and accounting and finance. Everything is transformed like insane. Everyone right now gets infinite numbers of super highly skilled employees, doctors, lawyers, most importantly, coders. Everyone gets them for free or for tiny amounts of money, and everyone is hiring them like crazy by the hundreds and thousands and millions. And all that money flows into that center engine of intelligence. And that is the reason why this is not a bubble, why it's not going to stop, and why it's only going to accelerate. And Sam Altman and ChatGPT and OpenAI understand that. Jensen Huang for sure understands it, and Lisa Su understands it. That's why they're making these deals where it's about enormous land grabbing. And that is why I stay very excited about this industry. And I don't think there's any reason to have any doubts that we are at the inflection point towards an insane future that starts right now. So I hope that was helpful. Watch out for these AGI stocks and see you very soon.